All right, so we are in essentially what's going to be part three of this interview. As you can see, when Cliff's asked when he's asked a question, uh, he spends time really answering it. And
Yeah,
the
I'm
and
a
the
long-winded son of a bitch.
the interesting thing too, like if this was like a news segment or something, and you're on one of the big mainstream media sites, or all that crap is scripted. They already know what questions are going to be asked. I never once sent you my list of questions and said, "Hey, here's what we'd like to talk about." And I actually thought about doing it, like, well, just to give him a heads up in case he needs to go look into the data to see
Yeah.
something. But I'm like, I don't think that's gonna be necessary. So I didn't even bother to send it to you to say, "Hey, here's what some of the questions we were gonna ask." But before we get back into asking some questions, I have a question. I know some people have asked me from time to time. How much time? Like you just put out a report. I did the summary, which again
Right.
I thank you for letting me do these summaries, but how much time is involved? I understand your spiders and stuff, you got to tweak stuff and they do their thing, and that's not really your time, at least when they're working. But aside from that, how much time do you actually spend weekly, monthly, whatever it may be?
Oh, okay, I'll get into it. Let's start at the other end, though. Okay, I got a guy that works for me, Igor.
Yep.
He's a fellow that's worked for me for, geez, better part of probably 12 years now, running my server garden. It's not a big farm. We started off with actually in 2003 we scored. We had a really big score. We got an old used drive that was 5 gigabyte. So, you know, it was built
Yes.
up. Yes, exactly. It was built up out of crap, and then finally we got enough money. We bought an old Citrix array and started buying the modular things, and it became a little garden. Well, he puts in about in an average report, he'll put about 15 days. He'll actually be involved in each month, messing with the server, doing stuff for me, dumping data, clearing drives, all the network stuff, right? So he's got about 15 days, and let's say he's got minimum 2 hours a day in each of those days of screwing around. He's got another couple of jobs. He's like all the other millennials. He's got to work his ass off just to stay in place, right? And so I pay him really good money. Without me, I don't know how comfortable his life would be. But I pay him really good money because he's very skilled. He was an Air Force network admin for like 8 years and did admin work for 30, 40,000 people. So you know what that's like. He's
Yeah.
that level. Anyway, though, so he does that. He's got those 2 hours, say 30 hours a month minimum. And this is assuming we don't have to do any tuning. This is assuming we don't have to do any alteration of the code, and that happens every couple of months. You know how things are. They change something in the net, and stuff breaks. Now it's the new SHA 256 encryption I've got to deal with. All of this kind of stuff, right? Okay, so outside of that, outside of the technical issues, just to do the report, I try and get 3 pages of interpretation done a day, and that takes about 6 hours a day when I'm in interpretation mode. Okay. And so I will do that for 10 to 12 days. That's running 6 hours a day doing that. But to get to that, I have to set up the model space. I have to move it back and forth. I have all of the mechanics, if you will, of getting the data to display correctly within the system. And that's another hour of monkeying around. So that is just the interpretation part runs maybe full time for half a month, okay, is done on the interpretation part. The rest of it, getting all the data set up, running all the routines and stuff, consumes maybe between 20 and 40 hours a week. A few hours here, a few hours there. So when I actually sat down once and looked at it, I was doing about 80 hours a week to do a report. This
Wow.
was back in 2012. So it's a little easier now because basically I'm getting old and I'm not so driven to get down to the details. And so I throw out a lot of stuff. It just, isn't worth reporting on. Plus I ran into 2 issues. Years ago, I ran into an issue with my hands and the typing. It was just quite tedious to do so. Started doing the IDIR reports so I could do them in an audio fashion, but that's just inadequate because you just can't deliver enough factual material that way in a dense enough package, and also hurts the voice. And so I was able to get the hands sort of okay to do the typing, and then I push them to where the arthritis comes back, and then that's it. The report gets kind of ended in those last 2 or 3 days based on the amount of pain I'm in. as I get into the last part of the report. The way I work it, though, is kind of smart on my part. I get all the long-term data in the first third, first half, and then I start into the short-term data, and I leave all the immediacy data and the detail stuff for that last week of really intense writing. And basically, it's also so I don't have to go chase time, as I call it.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
no point in me saying something and it happens before I even get the report out. That happens every damn month. So you might get a report that's, say, 33 pages, right? I may have had to throw out 12 pages that I'd already written, and the shit's already happened because it had too much immediacy value in it, that kind
Wow.
of thing. I've gotten better at that over time, so I'm throwing away less. But fundamentally, it's a as I say, about 80 hours a week.
Well, you caught it close again with the earthquake stuff in Japan, and you're saying look
Exactly.
out for these things. You just narrowly got that out, and then bang, it happens.
Yeah. And that's the chasing time part, right?
Yeah,
And that's what.
the reason I'm asking you this is because, about your time and whatnot, is because I do your summaries. People, whenever I do these webbot videos, I'll get a lot of traffic on my YouTube channel because people were really interested in this. It's really fascinating. I know it is because it is for me, but I always say, well, look, he can't do this for free. Like the guy, he's only charging 10, 15 bucks for these reports. That's nothing. You might
Right.
go to lunch tomorrow and spend 15 bucks. It's
Yeah.
like, so it's like if you really support the guy and what he's doing and find what he's doing useful, I always got to give a plug, man. Go buy the
Oh,
freaking
I
report.
appreciate it too. I appreciate it. I don't know how much of my sales are actually due to you, but I know there's enough because I get people telling me, "Oh, I found you through JSNIP4,
Right.
and how cool," this kind of thing.
I'm glad. I'm not the kind of person, whether I got video ads or anything on my channel, it doesn't means nothing. I'm not the kind of guy that's just gonna I got the source, I'm just gonna soak them and milk them.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I maybe partially because I'm an IT guy myself and I know what you're talking about and the time and effort it takes to do some of the stuff. And it's like everyone else just wants to be able to sit here like this on their computer, press play, just press play and listen.
Yep.
Doesn't cost you anything, which is great, and that's great that we can do it this day and age where you have that
Right.
ability. But it's like, hey, guys, don't forget.
There's 35 bald guys making that button work.
Yeah, the guy's putting some effort into it. Throw him a bone.
Yeah.
Regardless. So
Well, we're doing okay, Joe. I mean, I've got to say that everybody in the woo-woo space, which is where I am
Yeah.
in terms of sales, we've lost maybe 2/3 of our income in the last few years as the depression has really hit because a lot of discretionary money went away in
Right.
2008, right? But we're doing okay here. I'm managing to make out, but I also have the ability where I don't really worry about it because I get even with the depression, I get maybe 2 job offers a week these days to go and do something with the blockchain if I really wanted to.
Oh,
So, so it's kind of a toss up. There are days when I say, boy, I sure would like to just go code.
I
you
hear
know,
you. Yeah, and I do that. I actually code most of my days.
oh,
I
it's
was
been so
network
long.
administrator, but I've kind of morphed into database development and programming, and now I've got all kinds of stuff, going on at work, which is good because it keeps me busy, But
Yeah.
so, anyways, I just want to kind of cover that clear. I felt like I needed to say that to
Yeah,
to
thanks
people
very much. And
because
and
you
I've got
never
to say
really
too
got
that
into it.
flat out to your face, you're one of the salt of the earth kind of guys. I've always let you do the WebBot stuff because you're not an egregious taker.
Yeah.
You contribute. You add value to the planet. So hey, have at it.
Man, I appreciate that, man. That's great. All right, so I'm gonna get into some of the questions again. Let's.
Sure.
I
Take
kind
some
of
more.
highlighted because I've got so. We decided on the break for anyone listening. We took a little break and realized because he's so thorough with his answers. I've got 10 pages. It's not happening. So I just started. We took a little kind of drink break. He wouldn't had a cup of coffee or something. I got a water. I started highlighting. Let me go scrub some of the questions. I still haven't gotten nowhere near it. So we were just talking like maybe we'll try to do this once a month or something, or whatever time allows, kind of a thing, where we can put some more questions together. I'll ask you guys, and I'll probably not let it go on for 2 or 3 days because I got so many questions so quick. And to say, okay, let's try to set an hour aside and and do it that way. So that's kind of our plan. We're going to see how that goes because I think these videos are very useful. You get questions asked, things you may have not have mentioned before or wrote in the WebBot report, and you can easily say, oh yeah, I know the answer to that, and just answer it. So it's great. So the next question we got here, why haven't we seen a commercial real estate crash yet? In Canada, commercial real estate is booming. And let me just add, it ain't booming in all of Canada. I know there's some areas, and I know the Chinese are throwing millions in some of these houses that are worth almost nothing for some reason. But will we ever see a crash in residential or commercial real estate with trillions of Chinese yuan flooding into real estate assets worldwide as a flight to safety?
Yes, we will, but it won't be like real estate crashes in the past because they've hit on the key thing. As China continues to create money and the Chinese continue to try and draw it out of the country, we'll continue to see weird shit like Vancouver, okay? But it's going to be very much a situation where the wealthy Chinese are going to be like an elite class, and there's just going to be enclaves. It'll be sort of like Brazil. You go to Rio, right? You're in even a 2 or 3 star hotel, a decent beach hotel. You take a wrong turn 1 block away from your hotel, and you're into a barrio, into a ghetto, into poverty that what you just spent on a drink would keep someone alive for 3 days. So we're going to see that kind of situation in what we think of as the developed world, where there might be a wealthy Chinese enclave in London, and literally, on the other side of an alleyway, a mews, you're into abject poverty with 5 families in a small dwelling, that sort of thing. So
Wow.
that's the kind of crash we're going to have. Now, the commercial real estate part of it is going to be real interesting because that goes this summer, and that's when the credit freeze. The only thing propping up commercial real estate now is free and easy non-money, the illusion of money created by the currency that's flowing out of the Federal Reserve. All of the world, by the way, all of the planet, all the central banks are being fed by the Federal Reserve. The minute that spigot shuts down, all of the other spigots start drying up. And you see this where we don't like those countries anymore, and they're all of a sudden starting to have problems. It's because our Federal Reserve isn't quite as happy with them, and they're not shoveling out the money as fast. Now, that's going to occur to our commercial real estate globally, pretty much like a switch as we go through this through into July-ish. I want to say maybe mid-July or so. You'll see the indicators of it for sure, because the credit system is just going to contract and contract and contract in these waves that will just shed all kinds of stuff in summer like we've never experienced before. It's going to be an event unlike anybody on the planet has ever experienced before. We can't really compare it to the 1930s and the bond crash. I have a tendency to do so simply because of the emotional values are similar. Ours are much deeper, much more profound. But I don't think it's going to be as simple as simply bonds going away. But when the bonds go away, which they will, then there goes the commercial real estate. So if you go back and look in the 1930s, you'll notice something occurred. In 1932, 33, we had the bonds crash. Roosevelt comes on in, he seizes the gold. In 1934, that was when the New York real estate market went. And that was even though they were building the Empire State Building, and they did that through the Depression time, all the other real estate aspects of everything just collapsed. And it was so interesting a time that whole buildings were being sold for what it had cost to put in the elevator 3 years previously.
Wow.
And that's how rapidly it occurred, was basically in 1934. It all happened in that single year. And within that year, a lot of people say the summer of 34 was when the markets just literally seized up. And that was when, getting back to the gold stocks and the mining stocks, that's when they really started taking off, 34 through 36, against the rising dollar and the falling of everything else. So if you look at it historically, gold, Harry Dent has a tendency to say that gold will devalue the way it did in the 30s and that the dollar will be king. That won't happen this time because the Fed has gotten to the point where they've been so egregious and there's no value left in the dollar. In the 30s, there was maybe 70 cents of the value left in the dollar. Now there's like 2 pennies. And so we'll just discard those 2 pennies in these last couple of years. But he's correct about saying that the gold stocks will go up, and gold and silver stocks will go up at least insofar as the market lasts, which we seem to see until in the data until 2017. But the commercial real estate from our data set seems to go this year. Now, in Canada, if you're in a little tiny area in Vancouver, you've got Chinese throwing millions of yuan at you converted to Canadian dollars. And 2 doors away, you've got an apartment building that can't be sold, that's been on the market for what, 2 years now. So commercial real estate's spotty, even in Canada. It's just
I watched a video of a drone, little remote control, that you or I could buy kind of one, and they went and flew into one of these houses that you're talking about that was spent millions just recently buying it. And the thing literally looks like a haunted house that's been there for 200 years. No one's lived in it. It's falling apart. It's
Peeling,
just
yeah, yeah.
unbelievable disarray.
Well,
And he
around here,
flew
that we've got
inside
so
the
much
thing.
water,
Unbelievable.
in your area, you've got the humidity issue. So you leave a house open down there, it's good. The mold's going to get it. We get it up here from the cold water from the rains. But, basically all these houses, the Chinese commercial real estate has nothing to do with real estate. It's absolutely nothing at all to do with real estate. It has to do with avoiding capital controls. These people have no intention of ever living in these buildings. They have no intention of ever completing any of the projects they tell the governments they're going to do. So, for instance, right now, there's a big flap up in Vancouver because the Chinese have got I don't know, maybe 60, $70 million into these two blocks in on Nelson Street in Vancouver, and they're saying they're going to do this mega 60-story apartment building and develop it and all of this. Fact of the matter is that they won't. If they were to, they put so much money into the property that if they were to convert and actually do the plan now, the only person that could ever afford to get into those apartments would be other mega wealthy Chinese. So really, if you look at what they're doing in the transactions, it's all about I don't know the Chinese word. Okay, there is a word for it, and it's kind of like a tontine. Now, a tontine is a word describing the early form of insurance, where we all get together and it's 12, and we all put $1 into a kitty, and whoever lives longest gets that kitty, and you hope that that dollar is still worth something when you get it, right? That was a tontine. The Chinese have something that's sort of similar, and that is that you buy a worthless asset. You literally can buy a rock on the side of a street that's got a chalk mark on it. It doesn't matter. There's a word it describes it in Chinese as being an ephemeral, okay, something that's not really there, and it exists only in your mind. And they're describing these housing purchases in China that way, using this kind of language, as though they're dealing with ephemerals. And so the idea is that you don't care that the rock is valueless. You're saying I place value on it because that you put that chalk mark on it. And so I'm willing to give you 60 million Chinese yuan for this. And the whole point is, aha, I've got something that the government of China will allow me to take the 60 million and put on elsewhere as a real thing. Whereas they won't let me do this with it in the country. They won't let me do that with it. I can't get it out of the country any other way. And I'm banking on the idea that my cousin Shin is going to want to buy this from me when he gets his millions 4 years from now, and I'll make money that way, and I'll still be selling him the stone with the chalk mark on it, not the building that we promised to build where that stone is.
Oh, okay.
So that's really what's going on.
That makes a lot of sense. Ask Cliff when the global coastal event will take place. What number one future event does he see that will have a major impact on the people?
That's got to be the sun activity over these next 4 years, the number one event. Not only do we have to deal with the UV rays that are potentially blinding, the burning rays, but we may well get to something that is as catastrophic as what early humanity faced. There's actually okay, I live in Washington State, North America. People can look it up. There's a county in the far northeastern part of our state called Pend Oreille County. Pend Oreille County has a cave complex that's now been sealed off from the public. But that cave complex has got signs of human habitation going back 40,000 years and showed that humans lived in that cave complex for over 1,000 years. And there's drawings in that cave complex near the mouth of the cave complex that show a human hand holding a stick going through a arched representation of that hole. And so you're standing, it's a drawing, an animation, so to speak, of a guy standing at the cave mouth, sticking a stick out, holding a stick out through the cave mouth, and the stick catching on fire.
Hmm.
And so that's why they were hiding out in caves. At the same time that human habitation in North America was in the caves in Pend Oreille, we had human habitation in Utah in caves. And they also have drawings of fires being started outside the caves by something from space. We assume light, we're just assuming culturally that they drew light as these little lines coming down, and it caused these fires. And these people were also dealing with the fact that Utah was a sea, and they were 300 feet up off of what is currently the floor of the valley. But they were a boat people, and they were living in caves and going out and fishing and everything, and they had little ladders that were 12 and 15 feet to account for the tidal action on their particular area in Utah. So that's really what we've got to face, is that kind of a change to our planet. That's the biggest thing going for your generation, your kids' generation, and their generation after that. And then 75, 80 years from now, things sort of start coming down from this cycle. So we're going to peak sometime in these next few years and then gradually come down the way we've been building up since maybe the late 40s.
Does your data still show that term global coastal event, or is that
Yes.
something else?
No, it still shows it. It's not an individual day. It's not an individual hour or anything. But we can say that it is. I really should have named it global coastal process as opposed to an event. But I was
Because
stupid when I did that,
okay,
right? And because event implies something in humans'
right now,
minds.
like it just happened.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And it won't be that way. It may be that for you because you may be in an area where that thing occurs real suddenly, like maybe in Los Angeles, we're going to get a sudden displacement wave from Japan cracking up that takes away most of the port and eliminates all of the waterways and big flood and all of that and damages California. And for them, that's an event, a global coastal thing. But for us up here, it might be a process that takes 15 years. So it won't really be an event for us. Um, that's kind of what we're running into.
Okay.
But the global coastal event, you might as well just say Earth changes, expando Earth, or whatever. See, I thought of that at that time as literally a discrete event. I didn't understand that it was part of the larger expansion process. Make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Makes a lot of sense. Um, Next one, question for Cliff. Will the US back the new dollar with gold or silver? Now, I'm also assuming there's going to be a new dollar in the way they're saying it as if it's true, but we don't necessarily know that. And, what is the data telling you about that?
It's very confused. Okay, there may indeed be an attempt for that. If so, it will fail. There may be an attempt for a issuance of a new dollar, and as I say, it will fail according to the data. So yeah, we have data showing that there's going to be an attempt to issue this, but we also have data showing further on no one wants it. They just won't deal with it. The political stuff is it's kind of like, do I really want to take a Hillary buck? No. If you got Hillary as president, the system collapses and she comes on out and says, "Hey, I put my picture on this piece of paper. You all take this and use it in Safeway."
Or like
No.
Harriet Tubman's face, they want to replace.
Right. I've got nothing against Tubman, but you know what I'm saying, right? The
Right.
fact that they're changing all of this stuff is also at a point of an emotional pivot for the social order. So they have done just the wrong thing. They can't help themselves. It's all part of their expressing of the manifest universe because universe wants things to be extreme. And at the most extreme, at the point where your currency is most vulnerable to lack of confidence, what do? You change a basic face on it. You
Right.
you you alter it at that level. It's almost as though you want it to fail, as
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
people to reject it. So they're doing everything badly at that level. Uh, the gold backed currency stuff is coming, but not from the US.
Okay.
And that's going to put us in a real world of hurt because we ain't got none.
Yep. In Canada, they just sold their last ounce
Yeah.
recently.
Well, Canada's different though. They've got so much in the ground that and it's so easily recovered relatively.
Well, they could probably turn around instantly then. Oh, manufacturing, or well, not really manufacturing, but like mining jobs and
Exactly.
manufacturing all of a
Exactly.
sudden created. Go get
Yeah.
the gold.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. By the way, you're going to see a planetary gold and silver rush like you wouldn't believe over these next 6 or 10 years. In fact, it's already underway. We've got emotional data showing that there's people out there in the middle of the night, all over the West here, especially, that go on out with vans and trucks that have got vacuum rigs in them. I saw this stuff in the data maybe in 1999 and not understanding what I was looking at. And in 2003 and 2004, it started happening. And these guys go out to culverts. All of these streams that people used to pan gold on have got culverts as the roads go through them. Those culverts are what? They're ridged little collection points,
Yeah.
long steel culverts. And these people going up there with water-based vacuum and vacuum out all of the stuff in there and separate out all the gold.
Wow.
I know guys that are doing pretty well. They won't say where their culverts are, but
Yeah.
they go back to those culverts every week and pick up flake.
Wow, that's incredible. I was out this. I forgot when I started to tell you about my boat earlier,
Yeah,
which we didn't record this for anyone listening. We were doing a test recording, but we were talking about our boats and stuff. And I forgot that the primary reason for me telling you this huge story about my boat and what I was doing with it was I had a bolt break off, and so I was like, well, let me get some penetrating lube, and I'll let it sit overnight before I bring it to this shop to rebuild the little pump or whatever. So I go over to the O'Reilly Auto Parts, and I hear a guy talking about scuba diving and this and that. And I'm like, oh, I'm certified. I haven't been in a long time, but I heard you talking
yeah.
about diving, and we start chatting, and this guy goes all over Florida. He goes to the best spots ever. So we're having a good conversation about stuff, and he's like, I was down in the Keys, and my buddy's got this device. It's like a shotgun shell. Boom! It blasts out and it does sonar.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we like found some wrecks. We didn't know what they were. He's like, but he says, I think it may have been that Mel Fisher site, the Etosha, but I'm not 100% sure. I really don't know. But it wasn't marked either. There was no buoy or nothing. So he says they went down there. He's like, he's like a master certified, whatever diver,
Yeah.
he goes down there and he's like, yeah, we knew it was the back end of an old ship. We could tell. And we started just kind of moving stuff around. What are we looking at here? And he says, he pulls out his necklace. Look what I found. And it's like I don't know what fleet it was from, but it was an old Spanish coin. It was really good condition. It's valued at like $8,000. So I saw that and I was thinking of gold, silver, and now you
Gold
got
rush.
this old
Yes, yeah.
gold rush
Yeah.
everywhere, and everybody wants to do it. But
Well, especially at your area. I mean, if I almost stayed in the South at one point, and if I had, I probably would have ended up in the treasure business. It's just so
I,
much allure.
yeah, it is. It's so fascinating. I think of it all the time. How I'd really like to go do that. And you can even get little leased spots like where the
Yeah.
1715 fleet is, and just go out there and use whether you're dredging or whatever you're doing. And not that long ago, maybe a month ago or so, a family just did it for fun on the weekends. They had their spot that they paid for their lease for the year, and man, they found a few things worth about $1 million
Oh
just like
yeah.
that.
It can
Just
happen so easily. Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So someone asked, kind of back on Canada for a second, how will Canada do with the global change slash war slash market crash? Do you see anything on that, or have you been?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Canada because the diaspora stuff, all the people moving out of the U.S. because of the nukes. It's also going to hit the Northeast because of the problems in the nuke plants in New York, and these areas are going to get worse. I'm going to that in a second. Remind me to come back to it. But anyway, the Canada gets a huge population influx because so many people flood across the border as the planetary expansion process continues. We're going to see the Earth basically shaking us all up and making us move. And one of the more stable areas in North America is going to end up being Canada. And it'll be a natural draw because it's not seismically active. There ain't a whole lot of volcanoes. There's all kinds of resources. And as the expansion and the sun activity it continues to occur, it'll get warmer up there. There'll be vast quantities of problems from the major forest fires burning off, or major forest burning. But at some point, in like say 20 years maybe, the climate will be ever so much more amenable to food growing and that kind of thing. Even though we'll be getting into the ice age, it's not going to hit Canada the way it had in the last ice age. So it shows as being a real, basically a solid rock on which to live. And a
Wow.
lot of people from even down into Central America head up into Canada over these next 20 plus years.
Interesting. Hi, Joe. I'm worried about the immigration problem with the radical Muslims that are trying to destroy the USA, concerned about the rapes and beatings and robberies that are happening in other countries like Switzerland and Germany. What does Clif High see about the United States and radical Muslims and illegal immigrants?
The two are really separate issues. The US and our data doesn't have the same kind of problems as Europe relative to the Muslim population. Immigration we're going to have to really rephrase our understanding of that, rethink it, okay? Because immigration is an idea that basically demands, is a word that demands the idea of a closed state and borders, okay? There's no immigration in a forest. I can get in a forest here
Right.
near where I am, and I can walk, and I can just keep heading north. And at some point, I'll cross into Canada, and I'll never know because I'm just between one tree and another tree, right? And so that's really what we've got to start looking at. So the idea of immigration is entirely a construct of a geopolitical thing that's fading away that won't exist in a few years anyway. Sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
We won't have the religious issues based on Islam here in this country that they have elsewhere. There's going to be a lot of hype about it. They're going to push it. The powers that be are going to push it because it's one of their big memes, but it's not going to pan out that way. We've got far bigger issues to worry about than religious nutters. And basically, the universe is going to give those religious nutters a whole lot of things to worry about that won't involve religion and take their
Yeah.
mind off some of this. Yeah,
Call it staying alive.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like
Feeding
they say,
yourself.
one of the best quotes ever is that God wasn't invented until man had a full belly.
Yeah. Joe, ask Cliff if he has ever been harassed by the government or have they tried to confiscate his work.
Yes.
Both?
Can't go into it,
Can't
Guy.
go into it.
I,
Okay,
I would rather not invite further problems by discussing it. Let me just
perfect.
put it that way.
So the answer is yes. That's that's interesting. Hi, Joe. Great that you are doing an interview with Cliff. Much appreciated. Also, thank you for your work. I'm interested about the Southern Hemisphere, especially Australia, as I live there, but also Africa and South America and Antarctica. Does he know why Obama and Patriarch Krill went to Antarctica recently, and why the Pope is so interested in it?
Okay, so let's be. This is really fascinating because I love Antarctica. There's all kinds of data on it. It's disproportionately huge in the data. We could almost have an Antarctica pop, even though there's only very few people that actually live there. And this makes no sense at all. It's not an artifact of my data. So let's be clear about that. I have a personal fascination because it's showing up as a statistical data anomaly continuously. So there's something there. Now, as to the why part, that goes to intent. So I don't know why these people are doing this, right? I don't know what is motivating them to do it. But I agree that there is a thing there. There is a something at the core of it that is causing that motivation. This is not some random weird thought from universe that happens to hit Obama when he wakes up in the morning. Oh, I think I'll go to Antarctica.
Right.
Yeah, right? There is a motivating force that is going on that has been consistent. It apparently has been there since the Germans got involved in the 40s, and it has never waned in terms of the emotional viewpoint of Antarctica, even though most of us don't think about it. We never really bring it up in our thoughts. How many times in a year do you even consider the continent? But
Never.
nonetheless, yeah, nonetheless, it has got a huge emotional presence in all of these various different entities. Terra entity, it dominates Terra entity periodically. I'll get so much stuff from Antarctica, and it's like, why is this stuff showing up? The problem for me is that there is not a large population there, and getting any kind of verbiage out of it to do any kind of a meaningful interpretation won't happen. I mean, I need millions and millions of words in order to get thousands of words from which to do the interpretation. And we don't have the population base talking about Antarctica. But every time Antarctica comes up in the powers that be entity, in the markets entity, or in Terra entity, it's got high emotional values for some reason. So just saying the word seems to cause an emotional response to people, unlike Alaska or Arctic. Okay, there's a huge discrepancy between the emotional values, the valence values for Antarctica and Arctic, and they're both poles. So there's something there. And whether we have a past association with it or it's a pending future association with it in a big way, I don't know. But it's going to be really just based on the amount of emotional values on it now, I would say it's one of the key top 10 things that are going to occupy humans for the next 80, 90 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
interesting. I mean,
and it shouldn't.
yeah, we've never cared about it. It doesn't do anything for us. We don't,
I know. It's cold. No one likes it. Yeah.
yeah. Wow, that's it. Really interesting. Hyperinflation. How high does he see it? The price of food, or how high do you see the price of food going? And I should maybe change the way he's asked this. Is there going to be hyperinflation?
Yeah, we see the hyperinflation. We're into kind of a deflationary moment or phase that'll go through until July. That's when the Feds respond to whatever it is we're facing in May. Their response is going to be a major, massive flooding of more currency, which is going to kick us into the hyperinflation. It'll hit food and those kind of items really hard. That's why I was really key in doing the Wujos back at the beginning of January, telling everybody get your gardens together now because it'll be key, not really in 2016, but later in the latter half of 2016 and really into 2017. So, you really shouldn't wait till 2017 to try and secure your skills to grow your own food, right? You need to be working on that now because the food prices are going to go way up. But also, there's the other issue, and that is the just-in-time delivery system is going to be much more critical of a failure and it'll fail because of the currency. So the hyperinflation causes a currency problem, which causes the credit system to freeze up, which shuts down the just-in-time delivery system. So food for somebody in California where they can walk out into a field that nobody is picking and help themselves, it's going to be no cost at all. Okay, but if you're up in Canada expecting to get a tomato and a lettuce from California, forget it. And
Right.
imagine what you would pay, right? That's what we're looking at. It's not so much the hyperinflation causing the price of food to go crazy in an even-handed way with a functioning system. That's not what's showing up. What's showing up is a dysfunctioning system that causes the hyperinflation to hit some people much more than others.
Kind of like Cuba. I remember watching. They had a show on TV. It seemed like maybe a year ago. I don't know if it only had one or two episodes and then went away, or I just quit watching. I don't remember, but it was about every like car in Cuba is like our old 1950s cars, and
Right.
they also talk about, that's one thing, and how expensive it is to get parts over there for these cars. But also, I was reading, a few years ago, I was in the mindset of, if stuff really got bad, and would I leave the country? Would I go to Panama? Would
Mhm.
I go to, so I was like doing a little research, and I found this guy on YouTube doing a video. He's riding his little motorcycle. He lives, I think it was Panama, and or maybe it was Costa Rica. It's actually Costa Rica, and he's saying, while he's riding his bike, he's recording and kind of talking to you like, "Hey, I'm an American. I
Mhm.
came here and just I want to shoot straight. I'm not a real estate agent trying to suck you in. I live here and I just want to tell you what it's like." And the work ethic pretty much sucks. Everybody at the government office, it's like
Yeah.
they treat you like it's their first day there. They just started,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's normal. But he also talked about, he's like, I got this little motorcycle. Look, and I don't even know what it was, a little Honda, a cheap motorcycle. He's like, you have any idea? I had to replace a piece of my exhaust system. They have them in
Yeah.
America. I could order it right now. Do you have any idea how expensive it was to get it over here?
Yeah.
And he went on
Yeah.
to talk about it. It was mind blowing how expensive it was, and that was 2 or 3 years ago when everything was, quote unquote fine.
Right. Right.
So
And it's
imagine then something like what you're talking about is coming.
Well, think of what's happening to southern island of Japan now, Kyushu,
Right.
right?
Oh,
That's one of the
prime
more
example.
heavily is one of the more heavily populated. They've had the major bridges that separate the east and west half of the island basically break. The only two that are standing are too unsafe to use, and they're separating from the ground that they're attached to. And so all of the factories on each side of the island are now unable to deliver anything to the other part of the island, let alone any part of Japan. All of the ports have been affected because the lands are heaving up and down. None of the stuff is matching the ocean anymore, so they can't even ship that way. And so even people living there,
Which your previous reports mentioned about port
exactly.
areas, exactly that happening to where ships can't even get in anyways.
Right, exactly. It's just a difference of a couple of inches and you're kind of screwed. Insofar as the parts though, I mean I had to laugh about Costa Rica. As a boat guy, you buy anything with the label marine on it, you're paying 5 times the profit you need to. That's why I like to buy things like the engine I'm going to put into the trimaran is going to be a Beta Marine, which is based on a Kubota tractor, so I can just buy tractor
There
parts.
you go.
No matter where I go, tractor parts are available.
Perfect. Yeah.
So that kind of thinking is going to be required. But you're quite right. It's like Cuba. Now, just as an aside about Cuba, I ran across this thing in the data the other day. A couple of guys in Hollywood are getting all whipped up because now that Cuba's open, they want to go and buy all those old cars for movies.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Yeah. Anyway, though, so but that's kind of what we're going to be dealing with. It's the hyperinflation is going to be nasty on food, depending on where you live, and could be in the other part of another county in your state. It's no big issue. But also, by the way, in the data, we show that the hyperinflation is so screwy, things are so goofy around here that you might get people in Chicago that drive to another state in order to just get stuff that isn't available in their area. And they're willing to pay the extra freight of driving and going over there. And the way they're going to do it is well, like over here in Western Washington, all the peaches and the good fruit are grown east of the mountains. So we would get together, some guy would go over at the peach harvest time, load up a big trailer and bring it all back for everybody, a collective effort, right? That's the kind of stuff showing up in the data for just regular shopping in the Midwest.
Wow.
People having to drive into other states, and so they get together as families. People take trailers, motorhomes, load up, and that kind of thing. So basically, if you look at it a particular way, the way the data is describing it, the people have to recreate the just-in-time delivery system because the official one has collapsed with the credit freeze. But you got, your uncle with his trailer or his big ass boat. They're going to go on over and pick some stuff up, and hey, Joe, you want to get some of this? You throw in some money, and there you go.
Yep.
So it's called make a way. Yeah, I had the question from the guy in Australia about Africa and this kind of thing. Africa is just going to kick ass. They've got because they've been so put down so long by the colonialists, and because of the money and so on. But also now is their time, Africa's resurgence here. But about 15 years ago, maybe even longer, when I was just getting into the data, I kept getting these weird language things coming out of Africa. And it was the same phrase in all these different languages. It took me forever to track it down. And it's called make a way. And when you write it in English, it's make, the word make with a hyphen and then a and then a hyphen and way. And it means no matter what, get up, big key forward, get your energy going
Yeah,
and get
make
it
it happen.
accomplished. Make
Yeah,
it happen.
make it
And so
happen.
you read stories now about that period when this make a way movement was starting in northwestern Africa. And now you read that it's pretty much swept all of Africa. It's bubbling up. It's a grassroots kind of a thing. And it's a new work ethos, okay? And there's actually stories about people that found an old abandoned track of a rail track, and it was connecting these two areas. And so they didn't have a train engine. So they got a bunch of people together. They built their own car, and they started off pulling it, humans pulling it. And then eventually they figured out how to get a little traction with a little bit of a couple of motorcycles. And so they had a little crew of motorcycles pulling it. And it's just, and then you read about these guys that go to trash dumps and build computers out of the scrap that they find in the trash dump in South Africa. And they're building Bitcoin computers that way now. That's make a way. And so
Yeah.
that ethos is going to drive them for like probably the next 200 years out of that continent. It's
Yeah, I mean,
hugely powerful.
I mean, once you're down at the bottom, you can only go up. I mean, right?
Correct.
So
Right,
they've
right,
already been living this way for so long, while we're over here living like this,
right.
and it's going to go like this. And this is easy to go up, but this coming down is not going to be easy.
No, emotionally, it's going to be really tough for us. Yep, yep.
Um, got that one. Our sun is going into a grand solar quiet and will be unable to produce sunspots, assuring in a new mini ice age. Does your webbot tell you anything about the global cooling our planet is about to experience? Which,
Sure, it's been doing it for years. How
yeah,
long have you and I been talking ice
yeah,
age?
I know.
But yeah, the ice age is going to be really, really interesting from my perspective because we're looking at it from the near side, right? So even with my long-term data, it's not like I get a view of when the ice age is going to go away. And so once I first started getting into the information indicating global cooling and ice age was going to pop up, I started really investigating the mechanics of it without it actually breaking. So it's breaking now, or bleeding now, however you want to think of it. And that's 300,000 years we, and almost 5 times we last three ice ages we've had haven't been, or excuse me, last four ice ages we've had haven't been that large compared to the one that's the fifth back, which in which they pushed out. It was where I'm living now, and it was probably a mile thick, right? Ice was down near to the Texas border at that point. So we're probably going to get something that large simply because we've been 115,000 years without one of these ice ages, one of these major cycles completing. And so, but my data is such that all I see is like the first hints of maybe the first 20 years of it, right? That kind of thing. And we're going to get, there's a particular kind of a snow. This kind of a snow comes down, and a scientist who's a snow scientist can go on over there and take a sample of it and tell you, just because of the type of snow it is, this snow is going to form a glacier. And there's words for this, and they've got it all scoped out. They're finding those now in areas all throughout the Caucasus Mountains. They're finding them in areas in northern China. And so we're getting glaciation starting in new spots now on the planet. At the same time that seemingly we're into, quote, global warming. But it's that zenith effect. It's the oscillation to the peak, and then you go down again. So we're oscillating up to the peak of that we can take as heat, and then of course the planet's got to cool itself off because it's self-regulating, and us humans who are scrambling around on it are going to have to live with a cool-off period. And we're going to really see those effects this fall, and that's going to also intrude in on some of our growing, some of our food production. Like all the rain that came down is a sign of an ice age. Texas, with all that rain coming down, the water evaporates from the ocean. In a heat period, we think of Venus as being hot and sultry and so on, right? Lots of moisture in the atmosphere. We don't ever want to go that route because the oceans die and the planet couldn't support life. In an ice age, we get sort of that same effect at the beginning of it, but what actually occurs is you get that precipitation out of the middle of the ocean, which is why that fog in the middle of the ocean was so key. That was what I saw that, and it was like, okay, I've been looking for something close to this to show up in the data since I'd been studying the glaciation, because that's how it always starts. The oceans actually drop in an ice age. So we can expect the oceans to retreat from all the coastline for two reasons. The Earth is expanding, and so the oceans would have to even out anyway, and it's available for the coast. But also, we're going to have such huge levels of evaporation that it will actually affect the volume of water available as salt in the ocean, and it'll alter the salinity over these next 4 or 5 years. And the volume of water will come down pretty soon. It won't come down as rain. And you have, 500 days of rain coming down as snow in 4 hours. That kind of,
Wow.
yeah,
Um,
ought to be really spectacular.
yeah, I would say so. Ask Cliff, in his data, does he see World War III and where it might take place?
That's, you got to define that. Are we
Yeah.
talking nuclear war between Russia, China, and the U.S.? No. We don't have any of that kind of crap. Are we talking nuclear war potential out of the U.S. against other people? Yeah. I don't think it'll happen, but there will be a lot of threats that way as the club gets rattled, as their blood sugar drops, as the fear levels rise and their guts start boiling on them. They're going to go batshit and they're going to try and do things. But the rest of the world isn't going to play along, at least insofar as our data is concerned. So I think there's World War III ongoing at the moment. All right. But it just depends on how you want to define it. So you got to be really particular about it. Insofar as World War III, yes, it's already occurring. Yes, we started it.
Yeah,
We're
the
we're
financial
the bad
side.
guys.
I mean,
Correct.
right? We started with financially, you could say.
Well, yeah, we did it. No, we also did it with all the color revolutions. Soros gave us money to
Yep.
the CIA. Then we had a revolution here, a orange revolution there, a green revolution here, a purple revolution there,
Yeah.
and it's
Arab
all this.
Spring, all that
Yep,
stuff.
yep, yep, yep. And see, that's World War III. It's just now, are they talking about, everybody having to run into bomb shelters, Battle of London kind of stuff? We don't have anything like that in our data. We have an entirely much more chaotic situation that basically could be described as the juxtaposition, the conjunction of a failing dollar, which supports the empire, and the collapse of confidence in the political structure that would allow them to issue a new dollar. And so basically, the rest of us, as far as the club is concerned, well, let me phrase it this way. When the dollar goes away, who gives a rat's ass about Hillary?
Right,
Her
right.
only power is 80 or 90 million dollars that she can pay minions to go kill people with. Once the dollar goes away, all those minions are going to say, "You're an old hag. I don't like you."
Yeah, that sounds about right. Will there be civil war in the U.S.?
Again, it's definition. No, there won't be organized, Republicans versus Democrats, or, North versus South kind of thing. Will there be strife and contention? Sure. Lots of it. So much so that it'll dominate the news. But organized, artillery battles and that kind of thing, no.
Okay. Now, I threw in this question. I saw this one. It's regarding Finland, kind of. So I was like, I don't know if you've ever even mentioned that, but I'll just go ahead and throw it out at you. I am from Finland, so my questions are about Finland and Europe. Does Cliff have any detailed information about Finland? Like, how does the Finnish economy look like? Is there relations between Finland and Europe, Russia?
Yeah, actually, we got a lot of data about Finland. I happen to like Finland because it's one of those weird places that doesn't have tides. Okay, and it's got lots of islands, so it's a great
Oh,
place to go sailing. Um, I was in northern Germany, so it's just, a little hop up there. But anyway, Finland actually shows up because it's got you remember years ago there was this the forecast for the new electrics, and we had these
yeah.
weird triangle things where you would have, an Italian physicist, a Canadian crystal, and a South African mineral that were going to be combined somehow, right? And they were going to participate in the new electrics. So there were these weird uh, groups of three that were all connected. Finland was in one of those. So there's I don't know what it is. There's a resource, whether it's a human mind or whether it's a mineral in the ground, I don't know. But there's a resource in Finland that's going to be cooperating or participating in the new electrics with the guys out of India. And that forms the India through Russia to Finland connection that then goes over to somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe Indonesia or something. So there's a triangle that will form, and they'll produce a key product for the new electrics that's going to be coming out of this. Finland's going to kick ass, oddly enough.
Interesting.
Uh, it's sort of like Canada. It's a rock solid place. There's going to be a lot of movement there. As the climate change, it won't be as harsh. The heat levels, even though we're going to have glaciation, from the data that we're showing now, it looks like the Arctic is going to get warmer, and the glaciation, the ice age, is going to be down in this kind of a band around the planet in the northern hemisphere, and then in the southern hemisphere, another banding like that. Really weird description. It may not play out that way. It may just be the way the words are building at the moment. But nonetheless, it shows that the poles are relatively ice free when the glaciation goes on.
Wow. Um, Ask if the Olympic Games are still on it. I know I've heard recently some mumblings, even in the news, that with the
Yeah.
problems in Brazil and stuff, they may cancel the Olympics and that whole
It
thing. Are
does
you
it
seeing
doesn't
anything?
yeah, in our data there's no there's lots and lots of verbiage about that, okay? But see, this is where we have to be, as you just say, you see it in the news about discussion of it. I can't tell the difference in the data whether it's a discussion or an event. We have a lot of words saying that there's no Olympics happening. Will it actually manifest? I don't know because of just this effect.
Right.
They may just simply be discussing it and they go ahead with it anyway. However, the data sets would seem to suggest that no. I mean, if I just had to look at the language and I didn't have this effect to consider, then I would say the data seems to suggest that no, things are going to get really out of hand, and the Olympics won't happen.
Wow. Interesting. Please ask Cliff what happened to his end of March window of the 21st to 30th of silver jumping 3 times. Is this date pushed back? They're still coming. Was that silver or was he talking about Bitcoin?
No, he's talking about silver. Silver is going to go limit up 3 times, okay? And it's connected to the Bitcoin. And we were within the three, we're still, I think we have 3 days or 4 days market days left of being in the window of the error range. So, for instance, on short-term data, it's uh, basically from the end of the beginning of the fourth week to the end of the third month, okay? And so, but the error range is that entire 3 month range as well. So the error range for any short-term prediction goes out 3 months.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still within the error range window there. I really screwed up when I did this because I was making this stuff up, inventing it as I was going along, as I was seeing the data, trying to figure the patterns and so on back in 97. So when I first got to the data type, when I noticed that there were three distinct data types, mainly at that point it was long-term data and short-term data because we were putting lots of documents on the web, but there weren't many people chatting about daily shit, right? And so there was not a lot of immediacy language. And so when I was doing it, I categorized the language based on my understanding in 1997, 98, 99 as to the data types. And then of course, it never dawned on me, this stuff's going to evolve. As more and more people come on, the level of the language won't be so formal, so legalistic. It'll go down more towards the trivial, and we'll get more immediacy data. Never saw any of that stuff coming. Never, I mean, I wasn't blindsided by it, but if I'd thought about it in 97, I could have predicted it, that, well, this had to happen. And so the nature of the language changed, and that's where we are here. So within these kind of predictions, the error range probably never should have been stated that way. I probably just should have said, oh, this is the total range that it can happen in, as opposed to figuring that there was a point like on a bell curve where
Right.
it was most likely to occur. So I would have been much more accurate if I'd just given the final range, but also much more inaccurate because a lot of stuff would have just fallen out.
Now, and I just read an article this morning, um, and they were saying that if you look at silver this year, last week it was up another 6%, but this year in total it's up around 25% from the
Yeah,
lows.
yeah. So
So
that's a
that's a
big jump, but
sizable move.
yeah, but what we're actually looking for is a day in which there's three limits up. Now,
Like
it doesn't
circuit
necessarily,
breakers triggering, right? And then you can't
right, but
trade, and then they turn it back on, it does it again, and
right,
then
but it may not necessarily be the U.S. market. Never dawned on me it might be Shanghai, and I don't know what their situation is there. I don't know what their limits are, but we may get to that level of frenetic activity. Basically, that's what was being described was frenetic buying activity for silver that overwhelms the mechanistic systems we've got for accepting and delivering on that buying. And
okay.
so it was described as as hitting limits 3 times in a single day.
Makes sense. I mean, I keep telling people like back in November of 2014, the CME group put those limits into place for the first time ever. Why
Yep,
would they do that if the price is
exactly.
going to crash? They've been letting it crash because they've been making it crash.
And they sure don't
They
slow
don't
it
want
down.
limit. Yeah, they don't want limits. They want to teach you a lesson to, hey, stay away. You just got burned bad. But if it's going to go crazy and go up higher, they need to control that the best they can. So if they see, again, they know these things well in advance, well before we do. Therefore, they're going to put this little rule in place. Well, we did that 2 years ago. Nothing's happened. No one, anybody forgot about
Yeah.
it. And then all of a sudden, it happens. And oh, great, good thing we had those limits in place. Of course, because
Yeah.
I know. So I don't think for one second that what you said is not going to happen. I know it's going to happen.
Sure, they
So,
built in mechanisms to control it.
and
Yeah.
it's been jumping, and they
Yeah.
just dumped like $2 billion
Billion. Billion.
worth of
I
paper
know.
at it, and it pretty much shrugged it. Like we were talking about, just
Yeah.
shrugged it off and back where it
We have,
was.
well, prior to the three limits up, there's another temporal marker that we're looking for, which is the reversal day or the fill the gap day. And we may have actually had that on Friday. And the fill the gap day linguistically is described as a day in which they beat the crap out of silver and it gets up and kicks their ass. So it ends the day basically unchanged,
Mm.
in spite of the fact that they drove it way the hell down, right? And so we may see our first dollar or $2 day that way, where they drive it all the way down and then it comes right back up over the rest of the day. Once we get that fill the gap day, then within the next 2 days, we get that limit up day. And then we sort of like reach a point within, I don't know, maybe 5 days of that, 6 days, something, a reasonably short period of time, couple of weeks maybe at the maximum, and that'll be a near-term top in silver. And then it's going to go into a quiescent mode in June, as the Federal Reserve is doing things to dampen activity and also basically to figure out what they're going to respond, how they're going to deal with it. And then they come out with a really bad decision. They don't have any approach to dealing with it that's good. So no matter what they do, it's going to screw up. It screws up, and then we go off to the races with hyperinflation and the metals and everything in July. Now, at that same time, we're going to see the major crash in the real estate market, commercial and residential, as the credit system freezes up. It's going to hit some kind of a toe. It's going to hit a little thing. Okay, it's described in the data as the whole body falling because the toes encountered a pebble. Okay, so it's basically you're walking along and you hit a pebble and you fall, right? And so in other words, the data is describing something very small that's going to just bring down the credit system all in a big whoop, just like that. And so within a few days after that, you start seeing those people that are desperate to sell their house or were thinking about it, dumping them on the market for anything they can get for it. People suddenly slashing their prices because they realize that the banks aren't there to finance the houses anymore. A lot of people don't know what to do because they owe banks that are going to be in disarray. And so there's all kinds of stuff that's going to affect it. And basically, we're into this like chaotic period of time. So I can describe a real estate market that might be appropriate to me here and wouldn't reflect what's going to happen to your area. Or we could look at real estate in Miami, where you're going to have huge condo kind of things, really expensive, high rise, look at the ocean, mega rich buildings where people will just walk away from the apartments because that building lost its electricity and it's too much trouble to lug food up and down 12 flights.
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing is going to occur. So it's just going to be weird.
Wow. Someone says Ethereum is a competitor to Bitcoin that has risen sharply recently and become the number two cryptocurrency. My question would be, when the term Bitcoin comes up in the reports, does it specifically mean Bitcoin, or does it, or I guess
Yeah, I see.
is it a placeholder for the cryptocurrency space in general?
No, it's not a placeholder because the cryptocurrencies are so well defined, because there's so much verbiage about all of them. They're easily tracked. So basically, my system operates on people or ideas. If there's enough chatter about if there were enough people using your name, which, as we know, has occurred, then I can pick you up in the data, even if they're not actually addressing you. In your particular case, your name happens to be more universally applied, your last name, right? But so in this sense, I get enough verbiage, I can really define it. So I can easily track Ethereum. And I don't define it as a competitor to Bitcoin. It's not at all. It's a layer on top of the Bitcoin platform. If Bitcoin were to go away, Ethereum would disappear. Ethereum would just be gone. It is the underlying network effect that Bitcoin built that allows Ethereum to exist. Now, Ethereum is going to hang around. It's going to merge in about 4 years with something. I don't know what it is. It may be Reggie Middleton's platform, but it merges with something else and becomes very much more powerful. So about 4 years from now, Ethereum becomes a real global system for lots of various different kinds of things, okay? Not just currency transfer, but meaningful information transfers. And meaningful information placement. Okay, we need new words. Okay, because there's going to be things that are not currency, that are information that will be valuable to us, and we'll exchange them, but it won't be a sale. Okay, so we're going to need to develop new words relative to the currency space as we go forward. Ethereum has long legs, though, but so does Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to end up being the settlement vehicle for major corporations and large groups. It'll get to the point where Bitcoin has an emotional attachment to silver at the moment. Over these next 2 years, it becomes more emotionally attached to gold. Gold starts taking on a new role, and Bitcoin then decouples when Bitcoin's about 2,200 US dollars. It's going to go off on its own track. No longer be emotionally bound to gold and silver. And at that point, it goes off to become a settlement vehicle and becomes very valuable. Wouldn't surprise me to see individual Bitcoins in current US dollars be worth well over $1 million
Wow.
because they'll be used as settlement vehicles. And everybody in the Bitcoin space will be using millibits or decibits, that kind of thing on
Right. I mean,
data.
the decimal goes over quite far currently.
Right,
So I can send you a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a Bitcoin,
right.
you know?
And Ethereum's going to hang around. It's got a different function, though. Ethereum is not simply an e-coin kind of a deal, right?
Okay. Ask Cliff how much he does not report. What sort of stuff can he give an example? This covers and how he gives hints without saying what he thinks he knows, or if you even do.
Yeah, I do that. I mean, there's times I just can't help myself because the information is like, tweaks something in me. It just, it's just so cool. I got to get it out there one way or another. I won't report on people. So anybody that's got a high enough profile, so I could do shit on celebrity. There's no question. I could track them down and,
Well, you
anything.
called a few years ago a wave of celebrity deaths. You called that, and it happened exactly when you said it would happen. One of
Right.
those, I think, being Michael Jackson.
Yeah. And your last name, I can,
Yeah.
I picked that out independently of this particular relationship, right? And just sent you that email. Hey, guy, watch out. Your foot's going to get zapped. It wasn't that, but
Right.
a near miss.
Yep.
So that kind of stuff actually can come out, but I don't want to be a tabloid.
Right.
I don't want to get into that. So, and also that's a violation of people's privacy. I think, right? Their future is their future, their
Right.
destiny. So I wouldn't want someone talking about my future out there. So I don't do that. So there's tons of stuff I don't report, and I'm thankful I don't, simply because my fingers couldn't take the typing.
All right. We are at the last hour. It just ended, but I have actually one more question. And
Let's
that's
do
it.
one more and we'll break then. Okay.
Are you planning on leaving the country? And if so, where would you go? Panama or somewhere else?
Uh, well, that's kind of a screwy question. No, I'm not planning on relocating and living in some other country. But I could certainly see myself sailing my boat around, and
Sure.
I might want to sail down to Mexico, and Latin America. That may want to go through the canal if it's still functioning, and go into the Caribbean. So yeah, I can see myself going around, but no, I'm not fleeing the U.S. because of things that are going to get bad. You have to understand too. I'm one of those guys who was born um, with Mars. I mean, if from an astrological viewpoint, I've got like Mars all over my shoulders, that kind of thing. So I'm a fighter. I like fighting. I've taken 30 plus years of Aikido. Confrontations are, they're my nut butter. They're my basic diet. So you give me a good fight, it's like, hey, I'm like the Australians. A good knuckle duster. Hey, let's get into it. And so, no, I'm not going to leave because of that. I
Yep.
may leave because I want to go see Hawaii for a while, but no.
Yeah,
Sort of makes sense?
and I agree too because like I said, I was doing a little research a few years ago, and I remember Gerald Celente had said it one time. He's like, after he got screwed over by MF Global, they stole his money out of his account, and he was just so furious. He said, "I'm just going to leave the damn country. I'm going to go find somewhere else." He said, "Yeah, I went to some of the best countries, and each time I went there, I started noticing, well, they got these things called politicians, and
Right.
they've got this thing called corruption, and
Right.
he said,
It's all
"Yeah,
the same.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
everywhere you go. It's the same story." He said, and I just said, what the hell am I doing? This is my country. I live here. I grew up here. I'm going to fight and stay here. I'm not going anywhere." So he said, I
Right.
came right back and decided I'm not leaving. That I'm just going to deal with what happens here. We're going to take our country back, and I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave the fight. So I kind
Well,
of feel the
let's
same way, like I don't want to leave either. This is our country. It was the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It's currently, going down the tubes, but this is where we live. I don't want to just go somewhere else. Like you said, and I've mentioned this too to people who think going elsewhere is fine. I'm like, well, it might be fine right this second, but when
yeah.
stuff starts going down and all the Americans
Uh,
over here,
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're not looked at as their pal anymore. You
Right.
know?
You're not a source of dollars anymore either. So
Yeah.
yeah.
See you
Yeah.
later. And I
Yeah.
had a friend of mine years ago. He used to work where I work, and he was like, I'm talking like 2008, 2009. He's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go take a vacation over into Egypt, and I'm like, man, I'll be honest, I don't think I'd want to go in that part of the world. You know, just not right now. I don't think so. Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So he goes, and it was ultimately fine. But he came back, and he's like, man, I go there. They put us on a bus. I pay them. They stop in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally in the desert, nowhere. Me and my buddy, we're the only Americans. And they're like, okay, get out here. And we're like, why? What? Aren't we going to keep going? No, no, no. Another bus comes for you. Another bus. So they stop. And they're like, okay, we're the only ones that got off the bus, really. They're starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah, bad sign. Yeah.
So they take off, and they're still saying, oh, sure enough, another bus comes. Go ahead, come on in. They're going to the same place the other bus was supposed to go. We're going to charge you all over again.
Ah,
You're an American. You
right,
paid that
right.
bus in full. You're paying us in full. We'll take you to the destination. So those
Probably
bus
paid for
drivers, they
Yeah.
have this deal. Hey, any Americans come in here, stick it to them.
Right. We'll drop them off here for you. Yeah.
Yep. So, and that was a first-hand account, that he told me. I never heard of that before. So, you can only imagine as things get a little, worse and people start to struggle more. Not even necessarily that the place, the countries or the world's going to crap, and just simply because it's getting harder for people to survive. And all of a sudden, again, an American here, we really need to,
Yeah.
squeeze this guy for everything we got because things are just getting a little bit harder over here. So yeah, I don't play.
Well, I lived through the currency exchange in France in the 60s when the French government failed, where Algeria left them as a colony, where they abandoned all their colonies, and it was basically the collapse of their civilization. I was literally just maybe not even 60 miles away in Alsace-Lorraine, a little province in Germany area, right? And watching it across the border, it was just unreal. This was a fundamental in a way that it is not now. France was a major global power at the time, right? And to see them collapse that way, and that really altered my worldview, because I was like 11, I think, at that time, and I watched that go on for that entire 2.5 years. And so I know how fragile the whole system can be and how easily it crumbles. And look what's happening now in Venezuela and
Oh,
Chile and all throughout Latin America. Brazil is now getting it, right?
they're cutting I think in Venezuela they're cutting electricity out for
Electricity.
4 hours a day.
We've got data showing that happens here in 2017 in the US, that we have regional blackouts that last sometimes for months. And the most highly valued person in that area is the generator man, the guy who can keep your generator going. And it's going to get that level here. Then we also get hit with all of the diaspora and all of that kind of stuff. And we need to break. I need to get the dogs out and stuff. But I wanted to end with one thing. You were talking about something that brought up this tagline I use on a lot of my reports, and I do it very specifically because I am very keyed in on language, and language ripples out into the distance. So the Taoist would say things like, a sage is a man who can manipulate the small in his backyard and cause the great to change 1,000 miles away. And they do that through language. And so here's a really good thought to think about. And that is, it is your universe, and you have every right to change it. And so I changed mine way back when. And so now I'm waiting for the rest of you guys to change yours.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah. And unfortunately, when I look around me,
I know.
not
Not a lot of
looking
people
good. At
change
least
it.
not
Yeah.
not yet, anyways.
But hey,
So
that's like the Taoists, though, right? You're never going to bloom, or the best rose grows from a pile of manure.
that's it. Let me go ahead and stop this video.